listening to the Air Raid Hour, a Buffalo Fanatics video experiment.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Air Raid Hour. Sorry about that little repeat on the intro video. I was messing around with some stuff and accidentally clicked it again, so that's my mistake. But I do like the intro, so maybe if you like the intro, that was a good thing for you. I am your host for the evening again, David Tilton at Tilt Money on Twitter. Joined again tonight by... We're not, he's producer, but he's kind of producer / co-host Kendall at this point. Kendall Mercy, with the fresh backdrop for his, what's this? Maybe like your fourth or fifth show with the backdrop?
Something like that. Fourth or fifth, like Air Raid Hour for sure. Somewhere around
certainly gives the film room a more professional look. You and Clay,
right, so, both having it. Yeah.
So that's always a good thing. We're presented, of course, by the Buffalo Fanatics Content Network with the new logo, although we need to get Bobby to make us a new backdrop with the new logo.
Or, they could give us those stickers and we could just smack it up right against all of these other ones. So it just covers the old BF with the new BF.
Exactly. The new logo is sweet. I really like it. It's clean.
It is nice.
It's definitely a little more modern. So I like that we're putting that out there. And of course, we're also sponsored by symbol.app/fanatics to get your $10 deposit bonus at Symbol. The market, maybe not so much in football right now, but the markets are really moving heavy in baseball and basketball right now. Yeah. Obviously, we've got the NBA playoffs going on. Baseball season is in full swing, and you're seeing a lot of movement there. So now's a good time, I think, to kind of sit back and assess what you want to do for the NFL season with your Symbol shares. A couple teams I've been looking at. I've been looking at the Bengals. I've been looking at the Chargers right now. One team that's value is really down right now, I think, because of the division they're in and the uncertainty around maybe the quarterback position and the coaching staff is the Raiders. And while I'm not super keen to necessarily jump in on the Raiders, they are really cheap right now. So I don't know, maybe something to think about. But like I said, symbol.app/fanatics and get your $10 deposit bonus using code Fanatics. So tonight, Kendall, we've got an interesting show, I'll say. And before we get into that, let me talk about some of the interesting people we've got in the comment section tonight. We've got John Herring in the house, Jason Humbert, Travis Sinet is back, and I like seeing Travis back. He's been back for the last few shows. Good to see him back. Randy, who was with us on the last show as a co-host guest, is back. Y is back, and man, simple screen name, Y, and he's here, and it's him. Here. Sheldon Cole is here. Don Keith is back, of course. Richard Forbes is in the house. Jason Taylor. We've got Eric Johnson, Lester Prisbel, and many others filtering in. But there is one person who is peculiarly, I can't say that, who is oddly missing. Truth to Hearts is in the house. Josh Clark is coming in now as well. Someone's missing from the comment section, a regular, and I wonder why. And so we're talking about specialists tonight. So we are actually going to be joined tonight by another guest host of comment section fame. And I want to give the comment section right now a chance to guess who it is. So I'm going to give it a few seconds here, Kendall, while you tell everyone how you're doing tonight and how excited you are to talk about special teams while people start guessing who this guest host is.
Oh, I mean, people might sleep on the special teams and how this might not be exactly the episode that everyone's clamoring for, but special teams, it's 1/3 of the game still, although it might feel like it's being phased out a little bit. It's still 1/3 of the game. And, you gotta have some equal investment, some equal production and efficiency from all three phases of the game to be truly successful as a team. And we're bringing in a special guest to talk about these specialists. So I'm excited to let the people know who it is, because I want to get right down into the nitty gritty.
So we've got a few responses so far. So Travis Sinet says janky. We've got Josh Clark saying ombre lob. Truth to Heart saying Brian Bowers. 743 Lock Doer says Richard Rush. Chris S says Chris Janky. Jason Taylor says Ombre Lob. And there's a few people in the comment section that are right. And we're going to bring them in right now. Let me switch up the old banner here. And we're going to bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Chris Janky. Chris, special teams tonight. Welcome to the show. I know that you are in the comment section every show for us, so we're really happy to have you on as a guest host tonight. And welcome. And don't forget to take yourself off mute. There you go. You're already with it. How are you
already a
doing
pro.
I just
tonight,
did.
Chris?
Yeah. I'm doing great. A little warm, a little bit of a heat wave, but it's probably true across the entire country anyways. But yeah, I'm doing great. Excited to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for those who don't
Does
know,
everything sound
Chris
okay, guys?
Oh yeah,
you're sounding good. You're sounding good.
Okay.
It's not necessarily like
Okay.
the
You guys were sounding a little. You guys were.
Chris, did we lose him?
I don't know,
The,
but
the
in any case,
microphone that you guys have, the nice microphones that you guys have.
oh yeah. I mean, look, as long as it's not lagging and we can understand you, it's all good,
Guys,
man.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Oh,
we can hear
no.
you. I'm
Can
gonna
you
take
hear
him out.
us?
I'm gonna take him out for just a
Okay,
second. And we'll get him back in. We'll get him back in when he gets a chance to fix that up. But
Yeah.
we are gonna talk special teams tonight with Chris once we get that sorted out. In any case, he did make it on for that. So hopefully he'll be back, and we'll start with our first segment. So the rundown for the show tonight is we're going to talk about the specialists. Obviously, we're going to talk about Tyler Bass, if he can continue or progress from his strong rookie season that he had last year, what that means for him. We're going to talk about the Bills, and did they or did they not upgrade at punter? A lot of people were big Corey Bojorquez haters before last season started, and including Judge. I'm not trying to put him on blast, but he was not a Corey Bojorquez fan. Plenty of receipts that wouldn't require me to put him on blast. So did the Bills upgrade at punter with Matt Haack? We'll talk about that for a little bit. Obviously, we're going to get into the specialists as far as the gunners and players that really only play a special teams role in this team, like the Tyler Matakaviches and Taiwan Jones of the world. And last but not least, we are certainly going to talk about that punt return and kick return competition and camp as the main topic of the night before we get into the Q&A. So let's kick it off first, Kendall, with Tyler Bass. Beat out Stephen Hauschka in camp last year as a rookie. There was a infamous video of him kind of kicking from the standstill, right? We look back at his numbers from last year. He was 28 for 34 as a rookie for over 82%, which is pretty solid by NFL standards. Anything over 80% is considered pretty good. He hit 57 of 59 extra points, which, as we know, is, I believe, a 33-yard extra point. Someone can correct me on that. Chris actually probably knows if that's right or not. And like I said, his touchback percentage, take that for what it's worth. A lot of touchbacks happen in the NFL, 70%, but 28 field goals as a rookie. And obviously in that Jets game had the six makes, the 6 of 8. So let's start with that. Tyler Bass. What do you expect from him in coming into his second year? Do you expect an improvement? Do you expect more of the same? Do you think he's going to get more opportunity to kick longer kicks? We know he made the 350 plus yarders in that one game. So what are you expecting out of Tyler Bass in year 2? And I'm going to try to bring Chris in while you're chatting.
So I think you teased a lot of great little points, because we could talk about a lot of them, which is probably surprising to a lot of people because we're talking about a kicker. But there's actually a lot to break down when it comes to Tyler Bass, because we only saw his rookie season. It was kind of concerning at the beginning. He had some struggles, some shakiness. But really, since that Jets game that you pointed out, he went 6 of 8 in that game. And yeah, you might get upset because he still missed 2 field goals. If he missed, 3. If he missed one more than that, it really could have put the game into balance. Obviously, the final score was 18-10, so it's not like that would have lost the game, but there is something to be said about momentum when there's a kicker that's missing a field goal that they just should be making. But really, when it comes to what I'm expecting from him next year, I'm just expecting marginal improvement on the front of consistency, because from that game, from that Jets game in week 7, he only missed 1 field goal and 1 extra point for the rest of the regular season. So you really saw, once he got that confidence, he really switched it into gear and really understood like that this is as much physical as it is mental. You need to understand that you're good enough to do it and have the confidence in yourself to continue doing it consistently. And once he believed in himself, I mean, you saw it after that Jets game. Like, he was hype. You could see he was really excited for himself. He really felt like he belonged in the league. And ever since that moment, we really didn't see a whole lot of shakiness from him outside of probably just that the Ravens game. But even Justin Tucker got humbled in that Ravens playoff game. So I'm expecting marginal improvement in terms of consistency. That's what I'm expecting, bottom line, from Bass.
It was really telling to me that the Bills went with the rookie kicker. Like, we know McDermott's history is that he tends to go with the vets over the young guys, and that's typically how he's brought guys along during the season. We saw it with AJ Epinesa. We saw it with many other players, Dawson Knox, things like that, where he wanted to have the kind of vet there first. Now, other guys have started right away. Ed Oliver started right away. Obviously, Trey White back in 2017 started right away. So there are exceptions to that, but this is a 6th-round kicker we're talking about.
Yeah.
And he won the job. And you're right. Let's not forget there was no preseason for him to get experience. That to me was kind of like his preseason knocked out in one game. And like you said, it wasn't like the Bills were necessarily in any true danger of losing that game, but those kicks were a nice balance of being important for the Bills because they couldn't punch it in the end zone, and also giving him a chance to feel like, hey, if I miss a kick maybe in this game, it's not the end of the world. And if I'm not mistaken, he was 6 for 8. I believe he did miss 2 kicks in that game. So, but getting 8 attempts in one game is kind of unheard of. And I agree with you. I think that was a big part of his sort of ascent the rest of the season. Chris S makes a good comment here. Bass was solid rookie or not. Like, even if you look at those numbers for a veteran kicker in the NFL, you'd say, wow, that's a pretty good season. And like I said, over 80% for a kicker is good. And Ombre is finally in the house. I'm here, boys. So here we go. Now, Jason Taylor makes an interesting point. Part of his shakiness possibly from terrible holding by Bojo. Now, we know early in the season there were some laces in holds from Bojo. Now, it appeared that he kind of got it together as the season went on. However, that is a good point. Richard here says, if the kicker cost us a game against the Jets, I would say the rest of the team blew it. And that is a great point, Richard.
No, that's true. It shouldn't have come down to Bass. It shouldn't have.
It never should have come down to it. So we're going to give Chris another chance here. Chris, you're back in the house. What did you make up?
I'm on my phone. I'm on my phone right now. So I don't think the tablet was working good enough. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can definitely hear you now. For sure.
Is there an echo? Because I don't have any earphones on this, unfortunately.
It's okay. It's okay.
For now, it's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you guys were talking a little bit about Tyler Bass as I was trying to fix my technical difficulties. Right? I was really happy with how Tyler Bass turned out last year, personally. I look at him as a 6th-round rookie, and the whole thing last year was it was between him and Hauschka, right? And we all knew that he had the leg to make it as a kicker. We just didn't know about maybe some of the accuracy or whatever. But I felt like his rookie year was similar to rookie years that you see from any rookie at any other position. Right. Thought he started out a little shaky. But as the year went on, I think he had more and more confidence, and the team had more and more confidence in him. So I expect a lot of big things from him. The only thing that I think might set him back a little bit is how much is he going to be kicking field goals this year? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Last year we were a touchdown machine, you know, and McDermott was very aggressive going for it on 4th and shorts. Whereas in years past, like, you know, I think even to 2019, McDermott was always kind of conservative, take the easy points. They really put their faith in Josh and the weapons that they have on offense, you know?
No, I agree. And I don't think we're going to see a change necessarily from McDermott on that front. I think he's going to continue to be aggressive. I think he knows that if he needs to trot Tyler Bass out there for a long field goal, he made enough long field goals last year. Was it the Cardinals game where he made the 350 plus yarders? I can't remember.
I think it was.
I think so, yeah.
And Ombre Lob says Tyler Bass may have missed a couple. The thing is, as a rookie, he did amazing. Yeah, I mean, look, you look back at a career for a kicker, and they're in over 80%. I mean, what was it? Mike Vanderjagt for the longest time, right? He was like the NFL all-time percentage leader in field goals, and I believe he was just somewhere in like the low 80s or mid 80s. So, it was definitely a nice. I don't want to call it a surprise because I think we all wanted him to succeed to that level. But the fact that he was able to step in and kind of drill some pretty clutch field goals, we know he made a clutch field goal in the Colts playoff game.
Yeah, that was huge.
That was a big.
That was a 50+ yarder too.
Yep, exactly.
And we know the Bills trotted him out there for that super long field goal. I think it was against the Rams, maybe, or the Seahawks before halftime.
Yeah,
and it was one of those where it was like you pretty much knew he wasn't going to make it. So those kind of like go against him in the stat column as a miss, but like we really didn't expect him to make kicks like that. So when you look at it in totality, really a strong year from him. I expect more of the same.
Another really underrated thing about Bass, if I can interject here, Tilt, for a moment. The thing that I like about him is that he has the leg power on kickoffs where he can just put it through the end zone and not let the opposing team bring it back for a kick return, you know, even in Buffalo in windy conditions and, you know, whatever. But I don't know if you guys remember the Chargers game specifically. In that Chargers game, he was purposefully kicking it. I think it was purposefully because the Chargers special teams was ridiculously bad last year, right? I mean, we really exposed that. And if you go back and watch that game, he short kicks it. He forces them to return it. And the Bills have such a great coverage unit that they were mostly starting, you know, around the 15, 20 yard. So I like that we have a choice of where it's not a situation where we've got a kicker like Dan Carpenter, and then we have to have who was it? Matt Gay, who's the kickoff specialist.
Yeah,
we don't have to worry about that anymore. We can do it all with Bass. So
I'm really glad you brought that up, Chris, because I was literally going to bring that up. I think you talked about it early, Tilt, talking about his like touchback percentage on kickoffs, and whatever it is, like I almost don't care because of what Chris said. Like we all know he has the leg. Like he could boom it out the back of the end zone on any play he's asked to do that. But I think like Chris laid out against a porous, like a really bad Chargers special team unit, he was purposefully pinning them in a corner and making them high hang time, stuff like that, make it easy for the coverage unit. And it's like you almost compare it to like Josh Allen's arm talent to Tyler Bass's leg talent. Like that's the kind of thing that we're getting, those little like nuances of, oh, I'm gonna pin you right here instead of just booming it through the end zone and just giving it to them at the 25. So yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, Chris, because I think that is a little nuanced point to this whole thing. He really is that talented when it comes to the power in his leg. And now it's just about refining those little things like the mental side and the accuracy.
And here's kind of a funny but somewhat true take here from Josh. He had a couple misses that were arguably makes where he kicked it over the side post. That one still stings a little, but
I mean, he was in love with the uprights the first like 3 weeks of the year. It seemed like he was just all about kissing the uprights with the football.
And Chris says, I mean, this is fair, right? In over the course of the season, in this league, you won't win championships kicking field goals. And I agree with that. You need to score touchdowns to win games by and large, but that doesn't mean that at the end of a high scoring game, you don't need a field goal to win it, right? Or at the end of a half, a field goal to put you up by 2 possessions, right? So while I definitely agree that you definitely need to score touchdowns, more regularly. Like we saw it happen in the AFC Championship game where we stalled out inside the 10 multiple times. There are situations in situational football where having a guy that you are really confident in making that kick is really important. And Chris says, yeah, I agree. Wouldn't need to perform when called. And that's exactly what it is. And I think that's exactly what we now can expect from Tyler Bass going into year 2 is that he will perform upon when called more likely than not. Mm-hmm. All right. So that wraps up the convo on Tyler Bass. Let's move over to the punter situation now, where we do have a change from 2020 to 2021 and something like understandably that we probably haven't talked about a lot because it's not really necessarily the most exciting topic, but Corey Bojorquez, for all the flack he got before the start of 2020, ended up having a pretty solid season last year. I was looking at his numbers. He averaged a gross 50.8 per punt. He had the long of 72. He only punted the ball 41 times. 18 inside the 20, touchback, only 7 touchbacks last year out of 41 punts. So 17% touchback percentage for a net of 44. Middle of the pack from PFF grading, but a pretty solid year, I would say, from Corey Bojorquez, holding issues aside early in the season. But the Bills decide we're not going to tender him. I believe he was an RFA. Chris, definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that. I believe he was an RFA, and we did not tender him.
He was eligible for restricted free agency. They chose not to tender him.
Did not tender him.
The only guy they tendered was Ike Butker. Mm-hmm. The only person was tendered. Everybody else who was a restricted free agent was not tendered.
All right. And so they bring in Matt Haack, I believe is how you say his name, who had 68.
Sorry, Till. I think it's pronounced Haack.
Matt Haack.
Okay, I'm all over the place with it. Yeah.
I mean, whatever. We'll call him Haack. Matt Haack. All right, fine. He had 68 punts last year, obviously, punting a little more with that Dolphins team, 44.7 net, so pretty close to Bojorquez. Did have only 2 touchbacks, so only a 2.94% touchback percentage out of 68 punts, which is quite impressive in my mind, but only a net average of 39.8, again, compared to Bojorquez 44. So that, 4 yards, we'll say, maybe is offset by the fact that this guy does not really put the ball into the end zone. So I'm going to start with you, Chris, on this one. Is this a matter of the Bills just didn't want to tender Bojorquez or pay Bojorquez maybe what he thought he could earn on the market as a free agent punter based on a successful 2020? Or is this a calculated move by the Bills to go for a punter that is a little bit more savvy at pinning teams deep, we'll say, inside their own 20?
So this is a great question, Till, and I've been thinking about this, pretty much until, once I realized I was going to be on the show today. I think this move at punter is sort of a move that coincides more with how good we were offensively last year than anything else. You think about it, I think I'm going to miss Bojorquez. I think he did a really great job last year. But if you look at them, take a look at the 2018-2019 Buffalo Bills, right? Look, that's the team. Those are the teams that, in 2020, of course, Bojorquez was on. But more 2018-2019, we had a lot of situations where our offense, we could not move the ball, and we really needed to flip the field. And that's what Bojorquez gave you. He's got a monster leg. He can boom it 50, 60 yards, and he can flip the field. And because we have such a great coverage unit on special teams, we can pin them back. And we can rely on that defense to win the position, win the field position battle, right? This year, and even really last year, how much did Bojorquez even – we had games where he didn't even punt. And I'm not saying that that's his fault. That's great, right? I mean, if you never have to use a punter, that's awesome, right? But I think having Matt Haack, it's going to be better because I think we're going to be able to pin our guys more, pin him at the 10, pin him at the 20, do some more directional punting type stuff. So I think it's really a calculated move where the Bills are really betting on this offense to not have to climb out of too many holes, not have to climb out of the end zone, not have to climb out of the, be stuck at the 15, the 20, because, the offense can really move the ball,
Kendall, slightly different question to you then from this angle is what Chris is saying about the offense, and we just talked about Tyler Bass, given the Bills' propensity to be aggressive last year, knowing that Bojorquez maybe wasn't as good pinning teams deep. Devil's advocate, would we see the Bills maybe punt more often? I would say no. Like when they're like around midfield, I would say no, because I tend to agree with Chris that the offense is going to get itself out of trouble more often than not. And then by that token, you don't necessarily need to have a guy that can boom at 60, 70 yards. So do you agree with that take, or do you have a different thought?
No, I agree with what you were saying, where it's like, I don't think the Bills offense is going to punt the ball in situations where they're around midfield unless they have to. Similarly to how you were talking about Tyler Bass, like, is Tyler Bass going to get more opportunities to take those long field goals? Like, no, unless it's the end of the half. Like, why wouldn't they trust Josh Allen to get 2 yards on a fourth down, 3 yards on a fourth down? Like, they showed that they have good effectiveness, a good enough execution to convert on those fourth downs and take that risk to get more than just 3 points or more than just flipping field position. That's where I find this whole like Matt Haack acquisition so weird, because the Bills have the cap space. Like, you look at it now, like, we could have re-signed Bojorquez. We could have tendered him. We could have re-signed him. We could have worked something out with him. But that's why it's like, okay, so maybe this is just something they prefer to do. But at the same time, it seems like they prefer to be more aggressive around midfield. So we're also not going to give him a lot of opportunities to pin other teams deep in their own territory. So I'm intrigued to see how he's going to do. I'm intrigued to see if a lot of this has to do with the holding skills. Whoever brought that up earlier, thank you, because that is a valid point. Like, I heard Matt Haack. I'm going to go back and forth on this all day. Matt Haack is better at holding the football. I believe it's Jason Sanders at Miami. I think he actually had some like great words about Matt Haack's ability to hold the football and get those laces the right way.
Here's the comment from David. Maybe it's more about the holder. Wasn't Corey B holding? And a couple other people have mentioned that as well.
I'm just so curious. Like, is it really about the punting, or is it really about that? Because I feel like the Bills aren't going to catch themselves so much on those 3 and outs where they need Bojorquez to really boom it down the field. Like, I feel like that's the main driver, the holding the ball, and the fact that they're confident that they're not going to go 3 and out so often.
Yeah.
And it looks like Dawn and Truth to Hearts agree. Truth to Hearts says that logic doesn't make sense. If we're not in field goal range and have to punt, why go with the punter that doesn't have the leg? Haack is perfect if you punt around the 50.
Yeah,
so
that's why it's weird.
So what Truth is saying is that if you're at the 50 and you're McDermott with this offense and it's a 4th and short, you're probably going to go for it. So Truth, I think, is saying what a lot of people thought in the counter argument, is that the Bills really are probably only going to punt when they're deep inside their own territory. And in that case, why wouldn't you want the guy with the big leg? And I could totally see that argument. I mean, you could certainly make that case. I think there's a lot of merit to that take and that opinion. Maybe it's something that, we haven't talked about enough. We're talking about how great Haack is at pinning teams inside the 10 or inside the 20. But at the same time, are you really going to be punting that often, even if you're around midfield with as good as this offense is?
That's the interesting point with the stats you brought up too with Matt Haack, because you said he only had 2 touchbacks out of 68 attempts versus Corey Bojorquez with 7 touchbacks on 41 attempts.
Yep.
So it's very interesting if you look at those attempts. Like, obviously, I haven't gone back and watched all 68 attempts or whatever it is, but how many of them did he even have an opportunity to kick it into the end zone for a touchback? There's only so many of those 68 attempts where he actually could have boomed it into the end zone. Whereas for
Yeah.
Bojorquez, like a percentage wise, it's probably more likely for him to get touchbacks because he has the power and the field position that he's punting from.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of put some context around it without getting too deep into the film when you look at sort of their inside 20 numbers. So on 68 punts, Haack was inside the 20 26 times at 38%. Boho was inside the 20 18 times on 41 attempts, so almost 44%. But again, we don't know. I mean, Haack could have been punting from, he could have been doing these full punts, right, from like his own 30. And, so we'd have to go back and check that. But in any case, those numbers are pretty comparable. This really seems to me like a directional sort of punting preference here. Ombre Lob says, if you would rather have a punter with amazing accuracy or a huge leg, which one would you rather have? I'd rather have accuracy, says Ombre Lob. And I'd say this. Truth to Heart's comment makes a lot of sense. If you're a team like the Bills and you're an offense that really is only going to punt often when you're on your own side of the field, I'm talking like, basically on your side of the field, anything 50-yard line and on opponent's territory, you're kind of going for it. I kind of agree with Truth to Hearts. I'd rather have the guy with the bigger leg. Now, we know Boho had some shank issues in years past. Now, he corrected most of that last year, only a few times where he really shanked the ball. And that was the big question around him going into last season, was the consistency. We knew he had the big leg, but could he consistently drive the ball deep? And I think he showed that last year. So it's funny how you can kind of justify either or here, but I think I'm with Truth to Hearts. I think I'd rather have the guy with the bigger leg. I understand the argument for the guy with more accuracy, but if you're this Bills offense, aren't you going to be going for it more often than not? And in that case, I'll take the guy with the bigger leg when, in my estimation, more times that you're going to be punting are going to be the times when maybe you're on your own 30, 20 and so forth. Chris, thoughts on Truth to Heart's take there? Is there merit to that?
I think there's definitely merit to it. I don't know. It's hard for me to really answer it because I'm not sure. Even I'm not sure how much Matt Haack tape I've seen. You know what I mean, in terms of how far he can kick it. And I'm not sure Corey Bojorquez is really the best directional punter I've ever seen. I mean, how much did he even punt last year? I know I keep saying that, but I mean, he went through games last year where he barely.
He only punted 41 times all year.
Didn't he have to, like, at the end of the year? Didn't he, like, he almost didn't qualify for punting statistics because he didn't punt enough or something? I mean, that's how good the offense was last year.
Yeah.
Well, here's a question from Chris: could it be a case of culture fit? Because we know Bojorquez was looking for a bigger contract. I believe I'm gonna recall here. I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit, but I believe there was something that happened in the offseason where he made a comment, or his agent made a comment about how he wanted to be one of the higher paid punters. I could be totally off here, but I believe I remember something about that. I could be wrong.
I can't confirm nor deny.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about that specifically. The thing that I was thinking when you guys were talking about Bojorquez is he eventually, late in free agency, ended up signing with the LA Rams.
Right.
Yep.
And he's going into a competition right now with Johnny Hekker, and he's not guaranteed to make that roster. So,
and Johnny Hekker has been one of the better punters in the league
exactly
the past several years. And we know Johnny Hekker also, to his credit, he's a little bit of a trick play maven as well, a la Brian Moorman. Johnny Hekker really reminds me of Brian Moorman a little bit in that regard. So don't really see much of that out of Corey Bojorquez. So that was an interesting move by him. I think he overplayed his hand, much like Randy is saying here. I firmly believe Boho was asking too much and wouldn't budge, and then finally just had to go somewhere. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying he can't win that competition, but Johnny Hekker is going to be tough to unseat, I believe.
Yeah. And they signed Matt Haack early in free agency too.
Yep.
I feel like he was the first or second guy they signed in free agency. So Brandon Beane must have known right away, like, this isn't going to work out. So,
yeah. And just for everyone's reference, Haack did sign a 3-year, $5.475 million deal with just over $1 million signing bonus. Now, it is a 3-year deal. However, there is an out in 2022 with only a $700,000 dead cap hit, which, I mean, kind of seems like a lot for a punter. But if it doesn't work out with him this year, it's not that difficult to say, look, we're going to move on. Yeah. If it does work out, then they have him, and it's nice to have him, and they've got him on a reasonable, I would say a decently reasonable contract. So, yeah. All right. Let's move on now to the special teamers, if you will, of the roster, right? And we talked about this a little bit on the last show, Kendall, when we were talking with Randy about this, and I was talking with Bruce about this, about how is the Bills roster now good enough from a pure positional skill set standpoint? I'm talking defense, offense, whether it's running back, whether it's linebacker, whether it's wide receiver, to where the Bills maybe can lean away from keeping more of the specialist type to going to more of a, hey, like this guy can play special teams, but his number one kind of, what he offers to this team is at his actual position? Or is it going to be the case of we really still need these guys that just kind of specialize on teams and don't offer much at their actual native position? And we start thinking about guys like Andre Smith and Taiwan Jones and maybe that seventh wide receiver, like Isaiah Hodgins type. Like, who are the guys that we expect that we know will be the core special teamers, and who are the guys that maybe have in the past had an inside track at making this roster as a teamer, but maybe now with the Bills roster how it is, maybe there's not room for them anymore. Mm-hmm. Any guys coming to mind, or do you think the Bills will still go the route of like keeping a Matakevich and an Andre Smith over a guy like a Tyrell Adams who offers you more on defense?
Well, I think there's certain guys that they're just kind of locked up in the special teams role, and they're locked up financially in a way where they're just going to make this roster. Like Tyler Matakevich is coming to mind. He seems like someone that's just going to be tough to cut based on the fact that we restructured him and gave him some money to kick it down the road, all that nonsense. To me, in that circumstantial scenario, it really doesn't matter about the whole argument you were laying out. However, going back to that argument, I would argue that it doesn't matter how good a team is, if they're good or bad, where they lay on that spectrum. I would argue it doesn't matter in terms of this philosophy on if you're going to keep guys purely for their special teams ability, because of the inherent nature of football and the inherent nature that injuries are inevitable. You need to have guys that are going to produce on defense or offense, whatever their primary position is first. I think when you're building a team, those players all have to lean. It doesn't have to be like a 70-30 split, but like at least 55-45. They have to lean towards dominance in their true position. Like Taiwan Jones and Saran Neal, I would argue those guys are pretty evenly split, like 50-50. You could make the argument that they're way more split onto the special teams side, but that's why I think that they specifically have their roster spots more in jeopardy than someone like Matakevich, because he has circumstances with the financial side. I think, to me, I've talked about this for the last couple of weeks or so. I think Neal has a much greater chance to make this team purely because of the positional need. And I think Taiwan Jones isn't safe because, I mean, he's great on special teams, but I think if the Bills can find a way to cut numbers at running back position and make sure that third running back can actually play the position well and also contribute on special teams, someone like Antonio Williams, maybe, that's a way to cut down roster spots in that position to maybe keep 7 wide receivers, something like that. So that's why I personally lean more towards, I'd like you to at least be 55% more effective on your true position. And then special teams is just that added bonus. Like, thank you for contributing there. Like, we need guys to do this.
And you mentioned a specific player, and I'm going to ask Chris about another player here in a second. But, the Bills have kept 4 running backs, and that 4th running back has traditionally been that special teamer, whether it's P. Ryan from years past, whether it's Taiwan Jones. If Antonio Williams can be a really above average special teamer, while we also know he's likely to give you a little bit more at the run, like the true running back position than Taiwan Jones. He has a chance to make this team. Now, he's going to have to really outshine Taiwan Jones on special teams to do that, but I think there's a chance. John comes in with the super chat, say Buff keeps AJ Obata, Ed Zimmerstar, Harrison Phillips, Boogie Group, Butler, Addison, Jerry Hughes. That's 12 million or so for a CB2. I like Jerry and want 55 here, but Butler, Addison equals Sherman. No, because I don't think there's any actual monetary saving by cutting Butler and Addison at this point after the restructures.
There's not much.
They would purely have to get beaten out by someone else to the point where the Bills would be comfortable cutting guys that there's no savings for. And I just don't see that happening. I could be wrong. It's unlikely, I feel like, but I just don't see it happening. Speaking of, this is a great segue, John, so thank you. Kendall, you mentioned Taiwan Jones at the running back position. John's talking a lot about the D-line here. One guy that's not mentioned here who is a very good special teamer and pretty much special teamer only to this point in his career is Daryl Johnson, who is kind of a fan favorite from a lot of Bills fans. We know the numbers are going to be tight on this defensive line, especially at edge after the Bills drafted Rousseau and Basham. So, Chris, a guy like Daryl Johnson, who's made the team the last couple years, and it really hasn't been too much of a surprise, is he on the outside looking in right now, even though he brings it on special teams? And we saw him pop off the screen a bunch of times last year on punt coverage and other types of coverage for Bam Johnson. So what do you think about Daryl Johnson in the mix of special teams?
You're hitting me with a tough question here, Milt.
That's why we got to bring you on. We got to hit you with a tough question.
The reason it's so tough is just because I love Daryl Johnson. I love what he brings to the team, specifically on special teams. But there are times in games where he does flash as a speed edge rusher. And when you're looking at the end of your roster and you're picking guys 51, 52, 53 for the 53-man roster, you're looking for guys who can do more than one thing, who can also play special teams, who can also pass rush, who can also, kick coverage, all that kind of stuff. But I don't know how he makes the team this year. I just think it's going to be too hard of a climb. I mean, unless they can come up with some creative trades or something, I just don't see it. And then you cross your fingers that you can keep him on the practice squad because he's been a really nice developmental piece for the team. And you hate to see guys like that go. The other thing, too, is that, honestly, he's so good on special teams. I know we've been talking a lot about the numbers, and I always kind of obsess on the roster numbers in terms of, what they keep at what position. I know specifically in 2019, there was a point in the year where they only had 5 linebackers on the roster. And one of the reasons is because Daryl Johnson almost runs like a linebacker on coverage. You know what I mean? You don't need that 6th special teams linebacker because you've got Daryl Johnson out there. So it's going to be hard for him to make the team, man. I'm rooting for the guy because I love him, but I just think the numbers are against him. Honestly, the numbers are against so many guys on that defensive line. I mean, there's going to be a lot of really tough calls to make.
Yeah, and honestly, there's not a ton of guys on that defensive line that also play special teams. I mean, AJ Epinesa, even as a rookie last year, played only 80 snaps of special teams. Jerry Hughes isn't playing special teams. Addison is not playing special teams. Oliver's not. Daryl Johnson's really the guy that stands out to you there. But you're right. He kind of runs like a linebacker. He's almost a little bit hybrid-y in a way as a linebacker. And so we will see. And it's really interesting because guys like Antonio Williams and Daryl Johnson, who at points in time, I'll know it was only really one game for Antonio Williams, but you like what you saw out of that one game. You probably you already know that Taiwan Jones isn't really giving you anything as a running back. There's potential there for a little bit of a dual role. Daryl Johnson, he can give you a little bit on defense, right? He's flashed a little bit in preseasons past. Daniel Gowry's asked, doesn't Daryl Johnson have practice squad? I mean, I believe every player technically does based on the COVID rules, right? I mean,
rules, he does. And I think Daryl was this is only his third year, so he still has practice squad eligibility, even if we're going by the old rules. So, yes.
I want to ask two little weird questions about Daryl Johnson. First, I want to ask both of you, do you think Daryl Johnson gives more on defense than Taiwan Jones gives on offense?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. And then secondly, Chris, you laid it out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the best way for Daryl Johnson to make this roster is the combination of keeping 10 defensive linemen and only 5 linebackers? Because you kind of alluded to that.
I think that's a possibility. I think in preseason, I think the coaching staff already knows what he can do on special teams. I think he's got to get sacks in the preseason. Even against backup linemen, third stringers, whatever. He's got to really show that in order to make the team. I mean, that's my opinion, but
I'm with you, man. I want him to make the team, but it's an uphill climb. It's an uphill climb for a guy like that. I hope, bottom line, if he can't make the team, I really hope he makes it to the practice squad.
John's opening the wound here. Taiwan Jones gave Houston something on a running back. A long reception out of the screen to be said. Let's not. I don't. It's not Taiwan Jones's fault. We can blame Saran Neal, who obviously gives you nothing on defense, but he's a great special teamer. So, full circle, Saran Neal, we've talked about a lot as maybe being a guy that really can't offer you a ton on defense. I know we like the idea of the fact that he's not really like a corner or a safety, that he can kind of do both. Yeah. But in this case, he really hasn't shown that he can do a lot on defense at either position. Mm-hmm. So again, he's a guy that to me is purely special teams only. Is there another safety that can come up and maybe sneak their way onto the team who can offer you more on defense for the future? Probably. However, there's also a very high likelihood that you can put a Tariq Thompson on the practice squad and have Saran Neal play out his contract this year and then let him go into free agency. So,
hey, if Neal can't do enough during the season and Thompson's on the practice squad, he does enough in special teams to make up whatever that disparity is between him and Neal on special teams, he could get called up and Neal could get pushed down.
Pierre's right. They always gave Taiwan Jones the nice speed in Madden. I mean, he was, what was it? The Raiders. He actually got a chance to play running back a little bit, and he wasn't awful. I mean,
no,
he did
wasn't
have the speed. But it was always kind of weird there with the Raiders. It was like they had Taiwan Jones, they had Darren McFadden, I believe. They had I think at that time I think they had Latavius Murray maybe at that point as well. It was a weird. Who was the other? They had Lynch, I think, right, for a couple years. So
I'm looking at it now. Taiwan Jones has never had more than 100 rushing yards in a season.
Right. So
I think another thing that's important to point out too, guys, is okay, you're saying, oh, well, Taiwan Jones can't run the ball. Well, is the coaching staff asking him to do that? I think the coaching staff is really asking him to focus on special teams because that's absolutely the best. You know what I mean? So we as fans go, oh, why do we have this guy if he can't run the ball? Well, it's because he's such a good gunner. It's now you say, okay, in Houston he had some chances. Yeah, early in 2017. In 2017, when he was on the Bills, he had some chances as well. It just comes down to depth and what the coaching staff asks you to do.
Yeah, and that's why Samaje Perine.
I think you mean Sonoris Perry.
Sonoris Perry. Sorry, excuse me.
I went with it the first time you said it too.
Yeah, my bad. It was Perry. Same initials, so
it is.
Got me thrown up. Yeah. So thank you for the fact check on that. Yes, and Ombre Lob says he does make rosters for a reason, and that's true. But let's get to the main topic for tonight. We're going to spend the last 10 minutes before the Q&A talking about probably the most exciting special teams topic we have heading into camp, and that is exciting and nerve-wracking, to be honest with you, is the battle for the punt return job and the battle for the kick return job. Now, I've gone on record on saying Andre Roberts, for those who didn't like him, I mean, Truth to Hearts and I are going to have a bet here because I know he is not in the camp of Andre Roberts. He's more of the straight line. He just ran into straight line guy, but he did serve and fill 2 roles with 1 roster spot. And we didn't really need him to be a contributor as a receiver, given our receiving core. We needed him to be the kick returner and the punt returner, which he did very well, in my opinion, near the top of the league in average, near the top of the league in total return yards. I think he was only second behind Cordero Patterson in overall kick return yardage. And he was valuable, and he was able to fill both roles. Now we head into this season, no Andre Roberts. Okay, let's start with that. McKenzie for kick returns. Is McKenzie also going to do punt returns? We know in his career, I have it right here. Isaiah McKenzie, out of all the guys on the Bills roster, is probably the most experienced returner at both kick and punt. He's got 39 career punt returns, 20 career kick returns. We know he had the one last year, the punt return last year for the touchdown against the Dolphins. But, 20 career kick returns in 4 seasons is not exactly a ton. Matt Breida, people have been brought his name up. He's only had 5 career kick returns, and they were all in 2017. Marquez Stevenson is a rookie. We know he was a phenomenal returner in college, had the over 26 yards, had the 3 touchdowns. And Pierre, for as much as I'd want to discredit it, I'm not going to. Like Christian Wade,
it's possible.
Maybe he could be a return man. Like, I don't know. But again, that it's still an outside chance for him. They're not gonna want to necessarily put Micah Hyde back there just to fair catch punts.
No.
What is going on with this kick return and punt return battle? So let's start with kick return, and talk about it in the context of roster building and where do we keep guys, where do we not keep guys, at what positions. Chris, let's start with you on this one. Kick return battle. And do we see the Bills using a different guy for the kick return and punt return? And if so, who is the guy that's winning the kick return battle?
Well, before the show today, I did a deep dive and I looked at all of the guys who we have who can either kick return or punt return. I looked at how many, opportunities did they get one way or the other. And you're right. McKenzie has experienced both kick returning and punt returning. So I think the way that the Bills have handled it this offseason is very similar to the way that they handled the offensive line going into 2019, which is just they brought in a lot of guys, right? And they signed Mitch Morse, they signed Feliciano, Quentin Spain, they drafted Cody Ford. I feel like the kick return job this year and punt return job is the same way. I think they're going to give a lot of guys a chance. And
this is good. This is good content right here.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. But yeah, it's hard to really predict right now because I haven't seen Brandon Powell, who also does kick return and punt return. I haven't seen him do anything in the NFL just because he did it with the Lions in 2018 and last year with the Atlanta Falcons. So betting money right now is on McKenzie because he can do both. And if he can do both, then you don't have to keep him as just the punt returner and another guy as just the kick returner. You know what I mean? Let's say it's your spot.
And McKenzie, to Daniel's credit here, he says, I have some concerns over McKenzie's hands in return duty. And we know that has been an issue for him in the past. He's had fumbling problems. He fumbled 6 times in Denver in 2017. He fumbled 4 times across Denver and Buffalo in 2018. Now, he hasn't fumbled since 2018. However, he has had 8 fumbles on return duty, which is a lot. I think Roberts had 1 last year? Someone can fact check me on that, but
I only remember 1 for Roberts, and it was
the Denver game, right? I think it was where he missed one. So, let's kind of flip this now. Can't Stevenson be this year's Bath? Says Truth to Hearts. Kendall, can Marquez Stevenson be a guy that puts himself in the mix as a kick returner, knowing that okay, he's a rookie. The Bills counted on Bass as a rookie, and obviously as their kicker, there was no other option. He was the kicker for better or for worse. We know Stevenson had the experience in college. Can Stevenson win the kick return job?
I mean, that's the only way he's going to make this roster. In my opinion, he has to win the kick return job to make this roster, because you look at it last year and we had one guy doing both the kick and punt return responsibilities. So he was doing a 2-for-1 role. Obviously, we all wanted him to go 3-for-1. We wanted him to be able to be a good wide receiver as well. So when you flip this and look at Stevenson, we want him to be a 2-for-1. If you're telling me that McKenzie can't win the kick return and he's only going to do punt return, then he's a 2-for-1 as wide receiver contributions and punt return contributions. So if he's losing kick return and it's to Marquez Stevenson, like that's the route for Stevenson to make this roster, because he would be contributing on a 2-for-1 basis with kick return and wide receiver abilities. But like, to me, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's going to make this roster just because he's a good kick returner. You look at his statistics, and yeah, he had 26 yards per return, but how much did those 3 touchdown returns in his career inflate that average? Like, what was the average if you say all of those three touchdowns, say they're all 90-yard kick return touchdowns, and instead of giving him 90 yards on all of those, give him 26 on all of those? What's his average shoot down to? Because if it shoots down to something like 20, 21, then I'm starting to think about, okay, is this dude just like going for the home run, or is he a good decision maker? Does he know how to put his foot in the dirt and just go north and south? Does he get to east and west? There's too many question marks with this rookie for me to sit here and tell you that he's making the roster because he's a good kick returner. But if he's making this roster, it's because he flat out beat Isaiah McKenzie in the kick returning responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that from a ceiling perspective, you're probably looking at Stevenson as your biggest home run threat, likely as a kick returner in the long term, and maybe even this year. We know McKenzie can be that. I mean, on the punting side, he did have that touchdown last year, but you look at Stevenson and you drafted him over other guys like Shi Smith, who we know Randy is not happy about. And you think, like, look, we talked about before the draft, it was going to be an uphill battle for a late round receiver to make this roster to begin with, because you had Hodgins coming back and you have McKenzie now back in the mix. It's the argument we made when the draft came around, was like, you're either going to take a receiver super early and he's going to make the team over Hodgins or McKenzie, or you're going to take a guy probably later as a UDFA and they're going to be on the practice squad. But the problem now is McKenzie's kind of in this in-between. Now, I know we drafted him pretty late. He's kind of now in this in-between limbo where you almost kind of want him to make the team, but in a way you're like, well, if we can practice squad him, that might be the best thing for his future. Mm-hmm. The problem is you look around and you're like, well, can he contribute on kick returns? If Andre Roberts was back in the mix and it wasn't Isaiah McKenzie who was on the team, let's say the Bills opted for Andre Roberts instead of Isaiah McKenzie, I don't think anybody would have an issue putting Marquez Stevenson onto the practice squad in that scenario. Right. So, Chris, Stevenson, thoughts on him potentially winning the kick return job? Do you see him contributing at all as a receiver? Is there a way for him to make this team with the Bills' propensity to only keep 6 receivers? And if so, where do we take away from maybe other positions if they do want to keep 7? Or do we not keep 7? Do we keep 6 and Stevenson is the odd man out, or maybe Hodgins is the odd man out? Where do you come out on this kick return?
With Stevenson, I think he really, again, I'm going to keep harping on this, and I'm happy this year that we actually get preseason football games. We're actually going to get a chance to see these guys on the field and see what they do. So he's going to have to really show out in the preseason. But then if he does show out in the preseason, then you've got a pretty tough decision on your hands.
Yep.
I, for one, think, and I know that they're not exactly the same player. I don't know a ton about Marquez Stevenson. I looked up after they were drafted, but I mean, you guys are the draft guys. You know everything. I'm not draft guy until after we make our picks, and then I look at who we have. But I think McKenzie and Stevenson are kind of too similar in that they're kind of quick, speedy. I don't know, kind of like jitterbug type receivers, if that makes any sense. And I'm not sure rostering two guys who have similar skill sets is advantageous to the Bills. And then that runs into the question, can we get them on the practice squad or not? Because I look at them with right now at least, I look at them with 6 receivers. I think Hodgins is going to make the 6th receiver because he's a big body. He's a go up and get it guy. He's a red zone guy. He's actually also a pretty decent route runner. I know he's not the fastest guy in the world, but I think he brings a different kind of element to the receiving core. Whereas Stevenson, I see as kind of like Isaiah McKenzie. I don't know. Am I off by saying that?
I don't think so. I think the Bills probably hope that he can be more of a receiving threat vertically than McKenzie is. McKenzie is definitely more of a horizontal type player when it comes to his play on offense, I would say, with the
stretching the field horizontally versus vertically.
Yeah, and the wheel routes and things like that. I think the Bills hope that Stevenson maybe can be more of a vertical in addition to that. Now, that may not happen in 2021, but we have to remember McKenzie is only here on a 1-year contract. He re-signed for 1 year. So it may be that the Bills' plan all along was, let's get McKenzie back for this year. Let's hope we can groom someone for the future. And maybe that's Stevenson in 2022, right? And I do think he would make it to the practice squad. We've talked about it a lot, how the myth of cutting guys and losing them is really not a big risk, right? Like most times you're going to get that guy back. Jeff says Stevenson practice squad. And let me just quickly get to John. He says, great show as ever. Signing off behind enemy lines in the 305. We know John's down there in Miami. Respect to the host. Thank you, John, of course. And I've seen a couple people mention, Donnie Brook mentions Emmanuel Sanders returned both back in the day. We know Cole Beasley used to return punts for the Cowboys back in the day. I would think at this stage of both of their careers, they're probably not going to be back there returning punts. I think both of them are too important to the offense to really risk that. I mean, hell, Stephon Diggs could return punts if he wanted him to, but they're not going to do that. I know Randy's trolling in the comments section.
I want to shout out Randy. He's been doing this for literally every single position we've gone through today. He's been plugging Duke Williams.
He's been very persistent. And now he's talking about Nate Becker. Okay. Anyway, Randy,
did you see what he said? He said, Duke should be a kick returner because he's so physical and he doesn't even need blockers. He'll take it to the end zone because he's so physical on his own. He's just,
So Truth saying you contradict yourself. Stevenson won't make the team because he's like McKenzie. I actually don't think I don't know. Maybe he's talking about what Chris said. I actually don't think he's like McKenzie in the way that I really don't think McKenzie has any vertical element to his game when it comes to the passing.
I didn't mean they're exactly the same type of receiver. But
they're similar.
Similar in they're both maybe kick return, punt return guys, and I didn't in that context.
I'm glad Truth brought this up because this is actually exactly where my head went when you guys were talking about it, and I was like, I also prefer Hodgins. And it's funny because I also kind of see Hodgins a little bit like Davis. So then where am I even going with this? And I felt like I was contradicting myself.
Well, I will say this. Coming out of the draft as prospects, Davis was touted more as a rangier, strider, vertical type only player. And Hodgins was touted as more of the route runner, big slot, sort of red zone
for sure
guy. Now we saw Davis. Yeah, we saw Davis was able to do more than just that pure vertical stuff last year. But in large part, I think it's fair to say that Davis was mostly a vertical type receiver, right? Yeah. I know he played a little bit out of the slot when John Brown was gone, but I don't think, and Truth is right, I don't think that these two guys are that similar in that regard. I think we got more out of Davis than probably we were even hoping for last year as a route runner. Whereas coming out, we kind of viewed him as more of a strider, vertical guy. So we'll see. And that's why I kind of have hope for Stevenson, because he was a vertical. He played slot. He played out. I mean, he did all of that for Houston. He did have a vertical element to his game. So we'll see about that. And we got a troll. Troll showed up. Okay, so that's fine. Anyway, Lester says return by committee, RBC. And this kind of would lead us into the kind of last thought on this topic, which is two different guys doing each role, right? This has been floated a lot. And this, to me, is the way that you potentially would see the Bills for the first time under McDermott keep 7 receivers, is if you have two guys, a guy doing each role. Maybe you have a guy like Stevenson make the team just as a kick returner, and maybe you have McKenzie make the team and he does your punt returns. This is not something that should be out of the question. Other teams around the NFL have dedicated kick return and punt return players. But what I think you'd see in most of those situations is that those that do have those dedicated players are likely to give you more as a receiver. We were okay, or at least I was okay with the fact that Andre Roberts wasn't, because he filled essentially 2 roster spots with 1. I hope we now appreciate what we had in Andre Roberts now having to make these types of decisions. So
I will say, Tilt, if we do end up keeping a guy who one person designated to punts and one person just designated to kicks, I think they have to be pretty good at it.
I agree.
I don't think having a marginal guy who just does kick returns and an okay guy who just does punt returns, I think they got to be really good at what they do in order for them to allocate 2 roster spots for 2 separate guys. So
I agree. Well, that's great conversation on kick and punt return. We'll spend about the next 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, doing a little Q&A to round out the show. And so while you guys are getting your questions ready, anything is fair game. Chris, the roster history expert, is on. So if you have any roster questions for him,
now's the time.
Please get those out. And while people are coming up with their questions, I want to bring this up because we might as well talk about it, right? The 7 receiver topic. And I think as we segue out of talking about the punt return, kick return, it's a great way to start the Q&A to talk about, because we have some people like Randy saying Hodgins will make it. And then we have John saying, I hope Hodgins makes the team. Then we have, I thought there was someone who made a comment about Stevenson being a lock to make the team. So let me find that one. Oh, here it is. AK Cash says, Hodgins' type so far means nothing without pads, and this is something Bruce mentioned as well. Yep. Stevenson returns kicks and stretches the field. I think this point is Stevenson's job to lose. So, Chris, as the roster expert, as far as the roster analysis expert, what percentage likelihood would you put it on the Bills actually keeping 7 wide receivers?
So when this kind of talk about keeping 7 receivers was originally brought up, I want to say back after the draft, I put it at like 5% maybe. I really didn't think it was feasible. The more I think about it now, just in terms of the future of the team, not just this year, but you're talking next year, Emmanuel Sanders is on a 1-year deal. There's talk that they maybe might move on from Cole Beasley. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Who knows? You're basically left with Diggs and Davis as sure things. And, McKenzie will be a free agent too. So I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's nearly as impossible as I thought it was several months ago. I don't want to put a percentage on it, but I will say that I am warming up to the idea that they could keep 7. I personally wouldn't do it. But if they did it, I wouldn't be mad or anything. I would like to point out that if we do keep 7 receivers, there's no way there's going to be more than 6 active for game day. So when you're keeping a 7th receiver, you're keeping him for development, right? like you keep the extra offensive lineman for development, or maybe the extra defensive end for development. And of course for injury if somebody gets hurt, right?
Right.
Absolutely. It's really interesting the talk about Sanders 1-year deal, Beasley, what's the future for him? We don't really know what we have in Hodgins yet, and we don't really know what we have in Stevenson yet. So you're potentially looking at, you're right, like Diggs and Davis could be the foundation of this receiving core in very short order. And in which case you're looking at guys like Hodgins and Stevenson outside of like what you might do in free agency in the draft in future years as really the only young guns on the roster that potentially could have a future impact with this team beyond, maybe 2021. So Kendall, 7 wide receivers, open to the idea, against it? Where do you come out on this?
Oh, I'm definitely open to the idea. I think very similar to where Chris was like post draft, just after the draft, where I was like, I don't know, I want to keep Stevenson, but this is going to be weird. Like, how do we get this done? And the more we all, obviously we've gone through now all of the positions, we've had conversations about each position group, and pretty much because we started in the order that we did and wide receivers were so early, it's easier to wrap my head around which areas of the team you have to chop off to add that one guy in the wide receiver room. And that's kind of been the narrative. Like every single position group we go through, we're like, probably outside of like defensive line, because that's also so stacked and so tight in there. But other than that, it's like, that's the narrative. It's like each position group we've gone through, it's like, all right, how do we chop this off so we can keep Darryl Johnson? How do we chop this off so we can keep Marcus Stevenson? So I'm not going to sit here and say that I want it to happen. But if it happens, I will definitely be excited, because it means it's exciting. It's a skill position. It's wide receiver. Like, I'm happy to see that we're investing in the position that the Bills offense uses so well. And that means that Marcus Stevenson is going to be a good kick returner, things like that. Like, that's what keeping 7 would mean. All those kind of, like, Hodgins is as good as the hype suggests, all of those things. So I would be excited if it happens. But like, if I was Brandon Beane, it's going to be hard for me to be unconventional and keep 7.
Yeah. And I think this is going to come down to McDermott, right? He's going to probably make that final call. And
good point.
And it is interesting because if they do keep 7, it will show a little bit of an evolution in sort of how McDermott has handled things. Truth to Hearts makes a very good comment here. I think preseason will determine all this, and we have to, like, it feels like forever since we had a preseason, right? I mean, it's 2019. It was the last time we had it. And as someone who talks Bills, talks football, like, preseason matters to me. It matters to me obviously as a content creator, it makes it a little easier because we have stuff to talk about. But I mean, we didn't have a preseason last year, so it was very difficult to get any kind of real assessment outside of reports coming out of training camp. It's really something that I think maybe we're more excited about preseason than ever. It's like, you never know what you have until it's gone, right?
Yeah.
So
last year really felt like the dark ages, wasn't it? I mean,
I know.
We were totally in the dark.
Yep.
Every sports reporter was saying, they couldn't divulge any, who's lining up with first team, second team, third team. So everybody had questions, and, we couldn't get any answers until, it was basically time to make cuts. So yeah, I'm super happy that we've got some preseason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it's only 3 games, I mean, that's kind of a nice compromise, right? We don't have to drag it out for super long, but you still, it's nice for the Bills in the sense that, you don't have to trot Josh Allen out there at all. You don't have to trot you are now that sort of elite team that does not have to play any of their like real studs in preseason. You basically use it as evaluation for your bottom of the roster guys, which finally the Bills have the depth, and these are going to be good players that are fighting for this team. This is a really interesting question here from Chris. Says, other than the QB position, what positions can we afford to skinny up, therefore opening room on the roster for the potential to keep maybe 10 defensive linemen, or the potential maybe to keep 7 wide receivers? And Chris, you mentioned the Bills haven't done this on the opening day roster, but maybe linebacker is a position where they skinny up and they say, like, we don't need a Matakevich and an Andre Smith because we're going to keep Matakevich only, and a guy like a Tyrell Adams maybe as the fourth linebacker, or a Tyrell Dotson can be double duty as defense and special teams. So linebacker to me stands out. Chris, what about you? What?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I was just going to say they also play nickel coverage so much with Taron Johnson with only 2 linebackers. So
Right.
a lot of people use that as an argument for only keeping 5 as well, which I agree with to a certain extent. So sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to ask you, are there any other positions that you could see them lopping off? I have a couple in mind. I'm curious to hear if you say some of these other ones I'm thinking of.
So I'm not going to go into a big long story here because I want the guys to get in more questions. I went through the roster. You know, I this is stuff that I think about all the time, and I went through and I said, okay, what are the minimum number of players at each position, right? So quarterback, you need at
Wait,
least.
Chris,
Whoop,
we're getting an alert here. We need an interruption because we have an alert from the Trek reviewer. Expert Chris Janke answered this question on the hot seat. In 1991, the Bills had a kickoff specialist for 14 games. This player would play 11 years for the Giants, Denver Broncos, Oakland Raiders, and Buffalo. Who is he?
Dude, I was 10.
Okay. I don't know. I think Trek reviewer, you can put the answer in there. I don't know who it is. You
I
put
don't
it
know.
anyway. Sorry to
That's
interrupt
funny.
you, Chris. Go back to what you were saying.
First of all, I never called myself an expert. Okay, so
Maybe we did. Maybe we did.
I would call myself an expert during the McDermott Bean era. But anyways,
Fair.
I went through and I said, okay, at least 2 quarterbacks, at least 3 running backs, at least 3. I went through every position and I said the absolute minimum.
Yeah.
When we did that, I got to, and I didn't name players. I didn't say, okay, Cody Ford is one of the offensive linemen or whatever. I just went through guys at positions. And I came up with about 46 players. So what you're really looking at here is a 53-man roster. You're looking at 7 guys, one way or another, who can swing. And they say, okay, we're going to keep 6 receivers. We're going to keep 6 linebackers. We're going to kick, So, I went into this, and you're. What was the original question, Joe?
What's a position group that you think could be slimmed down a bit in order to keep room, maybe for an extra receiver or an extra defensive lineman? Other than linebacker.
Right. I think the most likely, and I think we've talked about it, and you guys have talked about it on the show, I think the most likely is running back, and I think also potentially tight end. I think those are 2 spots. I also think they could easily just go with 2 quarterbacks.
Yep, and I agree with that.
Weaver and Fromm. But I think there's too much talent on the defensive line to go 8, 4 defensive tackles, 4 defensive ends. That's not happening. There's too much talent at wide receiver to go with just 5. I know they've gone with 5 in the past. So those are the positions that I really look at. I've been a big believer in 10 offensive linemen. I'm starting to wane on that. I think it's more likely to be 9.
Yeah.
And that, that you could also have an argument with, but
I would say that if on either side of the line, whether it's D-line or O-line, the more likely side that you're keeping 10 is D-line. That would be my guess. But, who knows? Kendall, we'll throw this one to you. Name 5 players you don't want to see play in the preseason. And let's make this interesting. We'll take Josh and Diggs out of the equation.
Unbelievable.
We're not. We all are going to agree we don't need to see them in the preseason. Other than Josh and Diggs, 5 guys that you don't need to see play in the preseason.
I mean, right off the bat, I don't need to see Poyer Hyde. I think that's easy enough. Outside of that, though, it's so tough. I was thinking about Zach Moss maybe because I don't want to see him re-aggravate anything with his ankle, but I also want to see I want him to get warmed up too. I don't want him to be totally knocking the rust off for the regular season. So I can't sit here and say Zach Moss, even though that's an interesting one. Tre'Davious White, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's 3. I want to see Tremaine Edmonds at least a little bit. Not a lot, but I want to see him a little bit. Maybe Beasley. I see that in the chat. Maybe Beasley. It's really tough to get to 5, though. I feel like if you're taking out Josh and Diggs, outside of the big 3 in the secondary, like, who are you really scared about getting injured?
I don't want to see Deion Dawkins. I don't need to see him in the preseason.
That's fair.
I don't need to see. I honestly, this may come as a surprise. I don't need to see Ed Oliver in the preseason. Don't throw him out there.
I was thinking about that, but
I could also see why they would want. I could also see why they would want to see him maybe next to Star, and that's another one. Do you want to see Star in the preseason? I think yes.
I definitely want to see something from Star in the preseason.
So if I had to narrow it down, I'd honestly say it would be Hyde, Poyer, White. It would be Hyde, Poyer, White,
Dawkins. You said Dawkins,
and
Cole Beasley. Probably the 5th, right?
Yeah, probably Cole Beasley.
You'd take him slight edge over Oliver there.
Yeah, probably, because I do kind of want to see Oliver get a few reps next to Star in the preseason. So I will. Yeah, I don't. I mean, Hughes is gonna play like 2 snaps. I don't really care if Hughes plays.
That was the first guy I was thinking of with Hughes, but then I was also thinking the competition is so tense. I mean, he has to at least get out there and show it just in practice, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I'll swing this question around. I know someone didn't ask it. Name me the top 3 guys that you are most looking forward to seeing play in preseason.
Ooh, that's a good question.
That's
right,
a
Chris,
very good question.
Start with you on this one, Chris, and I'll last.
I'm not ready. I haven't taken notes.
I just went on the.
I'll go first then.
Okay.
I want to see Cody Ford. I want to see Dawson Knox. And I want to see the Dane train, Dane Jackson. Those are the three I'm going to really pay attention to. There's a lot of good options. Stevenson at kick returner, maybe you want to see Rousseau and Basham. I get it. But I kind of want to see a couple veterans more so than I want to see the rookies and how they kind of step up. So a lot of options there. Chris, now that you've had a few seconds to mull it over.
Yeah, it's funny. The last one we were saying, oh man, I can't think of 5. And now we're thinking, oh man, I can only say 3. Jeez.
The top 3 rookies maybe are what Pierre's thinking: Rousseau, Basham, and Brown. Now that's a nice trio of guys you want to watch.
There's really no wrong answer to this question.
No, there's no wrong answer.
The way I think about this. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say Don brings up an interesting one. Matt Breida would be an interesting one to watch this season. That's going to be fun.
So for me, I think about it like I really want to see guys like Rousseau and Basham, but I have a feeling I'm going to get a chance to see them during the regular season. So I'm not going to put guys like that on my list who I know I'm going to get a chance to see.
Right there with you, Chris.
Yeah. So like, I'm thinking Isaiah Hodgins, I really want to see.
Good pick.
That's probably the guy I want to see the most. Tilt already took Dane, so I can't take Dane. I really want to see, this is going to sound so boring, but I really want to see some of our backup linebackers. So I'm going to throw Will Dodson out there.
Oh, I love Dodson.
I really think he's one of the guys that they're trying to develop. And me personally, I really want to see DeMar Hamlin play.
Oh, you guys are taking all of mine. Why'd I have to go last?
All right, we gotta stop naming guys so Kendall will have a few left.
What a good one right here.
A tough question for you.
Okay, Jake Fromm's an interesting name dropped by TJ Donahue as a potential. Do we maybe have a trade chip in Jake Fromm if he plays well in the preseason? So Kendall, who are you looking forward to seeing?
I'm not going to waste a spot on Jake Fromm. Similarly to the roster spots as well. I gotta go with Stevenson because Hodgins was taken. Because there are obviously this wide receiver battle is what I'm honing in on. So I'll just take the player that's left, and that's Stevenson. Specifically, like we talked about it last week with the UDFAs. it's really tough for me to narrow down which UDFA I'm honing in on most. But I guess I'm honing in on Tariq Thompson, and if he can unseat Jaquan Johnson. Yeah, because I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm excited to see what Elijah Griffin and Nick McLeod can do, but I think I'm more excited to see if Tariq Thompson can play a true safety role or even back up Teron Johnson in the slot, things like that. And then a third is tough.
I think Ombre Lob is not referring to Agba, but Abada, I think is what he's saying. He wants to see Abada in the preseason. Now, Pierre has two interesting ones. I want to know who Pierre's third one is, because he's obviously got Spencer Brown.
Right.
And then he threw Christian Wade into the mix. I want to know who Pierre's third guy he's watching.
I want to know who Kendall's third is.
I don't even know who my third is. That's the thing. Like
Sanders? No one's mentioned Emmanuel Sanders.
I'm not really I'm not excited. He's the same kind of dude where it's like we're gonna see him in the regular season. I don't need to see him in the preseason.
What about
to get excited about it?
Trubisky, a couple people have mentioned. Do you want to see Trubisky?
And I don't really like. I want to see him because I don't want to see Allen. What was that, Chris?
Kendall, if you want to take Hamlin, I can find another guy.
No. You took Hamlin and I took Thompson. I suppose. I suppose I'm going to take Nick McLeod as well. I really do want to see if either any of the UDFA secondary players can sneak their way onto this roster. If I'm not going to take Nick McLeod, though, I think I'm actually going to pick Saran Neal. I want to see if he can carve out a role on defense.
Yep.
Additional to his obvious special teams contributions. I think I'm going to go with that.
And this was kind of a loaded. I mean, the point of this question really was like, we want to see a lot of guys, and I think
I can't wait till training camp.
The point was like, we are actually pretty excited about preseason this year. There's a lot of stuff to watch in the preseason, even just in 3 games. And we know how invested we are in following this team, and even watching those games late into the 3rd and 4th quarter. Like, we know all these guys. We're rooting for all of them. We know they're not all going to make the team, but it's going to be super fun. Basham's a great one.
My honorable mention, nobody mentioned him, so I'm going to give him a little shout out, is Forrest Lamp. I kind of want to see what Forrest Lamp
does.
That's
fair. That's a good one.
Because when you hear about him talked about on social media or whatever, you hear people saying like he's a locked in starter too. He might not even make the team. So I really want to see what he does and how they use him.
And that goes hand in hand with me wanting to see Cody Ford. How are they going to split that time in the preseason?
I suppose Jack Anderson backing up at center is an interesting watch too, if he's actually going to get that backup center job.
I think the fact of the matter is it's nice that we're talking about like seeing all these guys and not talking about like, I hope Josh Allen has a good first drive in the preseason to show that he's ready to take this.
I hope Nathan Peterman is all that we've drummed him up to be, and then he just isn't.
You think about in years past how much pressure and stock we put into that quarterback first drive or two in the preseason, and basically determined how the Bills season was going to go based on how they perform.
Everyone's intrigued. We want to know what's good with our third string. We want to know what's going on with third string. Oh my God, the 17, 18 years of the drought, we're all like, oh, our first string has a lot of holes in it. Who's going to fill them? And yeah, now it's definitely flipped on its head.
Yeah, I think that's as good a topic as any to end on. We got some really good engagement from the comments section on those questions. So we're going to end it there. We're at a good hour and a half. I want to thank Chris, of course, first and foremost, for coming on and lending his thoughts. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. And always thank you for being active in the comments section on every show. Kendall, I know that you've got a show lined up, I believe, with Jeff Landers.
Yep.
On Thursday. I will be off on Thursday. It's going to be Kendall and Jeff. And then Jeff and I will be doing July 5th. We got a little bit of an interesting schedule. Someone mentioned it earlier. There's some, we're taking a few days off here and there. We're mixing and matching the host just for the next couple weeks while Steve's on his hiatus. And I'm going to take a break as well for a couple days. So look, we appreciate it. We know it's the middle of summer right now. There's, wait until training camp. So we know that you guys tune in. You really want to hear Bills talk, and it means a lot to us. So thank you, of course, as always.
Let me thank you guys for bringing me on the show and for dealing with my technical difficulties.
Nah.
I appreciate
It's fine now. I mean,
It's not the
all
first
good.
time. It's not the first time, and it's not going to be the last.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I
Of
really
course,
appreciate
man.
the time, man.
And yes, and thanks for coming on, because everyone's schedules, we know it's tough to kind of arrange this stuff. So appreciate that. And we always end the show with it. And so Chris, we'll let you lead off with the sign out on the Go Bills tonight. So until next time.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.